Welcome back, everybody, to the seventh period on a Tuesday podcast. We have a very special episode for you. We have current CEO of WNet and former president of NBC News, Neal Shapiro. Neal, how are you today?
I'm good.
For any of our fellow students at BC that might be listening to this, Neal is actually a Bethlehem alum, and that's how we kind of reached out to him. I'm sure Bethlehem was probably a lot different around your time. I don't know if you have heard recently about the New York State laws about the cell phone policies. Have you heard about that at all?
I am not. We
Uh,
didn't have
so,
cell phones in high school.
well, yeah, of course, but now it's a New York State law that students cannot have cell phones or any outside devices in school. So,
Definitely one of the most defining features of high school.
So are you not allowed to bring them to school, or do you have to leave them in your locker?
The deal is that we hired a company to provide us with these pouches that you supposedly have to lock your phone in for the entire day. It was a big controversy as to whether or not the school should invest in the company because they've had like problematic like partnerships in the past. It was a controversy in terms of like whether there would be a dangerous situation that would come up and students wouldn't have access to their phones. But yeah, no, as Will mentioned, that's something that I would say so far has been a bit of a big part of the Bethlehem experience. Um,
Do they still have do you still have morning announcements to
oh
begin your
yeah.
day?
Um, so actually, a couple years ago, they would like broadcast. People would make morning announcements on it would be like a YouTube link, but that actually hasn't happened in a bit.
I guess not.
We usually we just have like the pledge that comes on every morning, and then if there's like a big announcement, they might say it on there. But actually, those morning announcements that you might be talking about, no, not anymore.
And you do the Pledge of Allegiance every morning?
We there's still a thing in school.
I've
We
started to I've started to
when I,
sit down for those.
when I was in high school, we did not do that, but we did have like a 5 minute morning announcement, which I got to do. That was my big thing. So there's
Well, that was going to be one of my questions that I was going to ask. I was going to say, like, is there something in high school that kind of led you to this career in news and media?
Yeah, a lot of things. I was editor of the paper. It was the Bethlehem Star. I don't know if it still is. That was the name of the newspaper.
It's what is it now? I can't remember the
We
name.
don't,
Sorry.
yeah.
Right, so it was that, and then I did the announcements every morning. It was like, you know, uh, whatever was happening, assemblies, things like that, early
Yeah.
dismissals, things like that, results of games, and I would goof around occasionally and get in trouble for like that, and that. So that
Yeah.
probably helps set the stage.
I remember when they would do the videos, they would have some funny skits where they would like be going around and interviewing people, asking them questions. But actually, I think one of the reasons that ended was the cell phone policy because people couldn't go around and like film interviews anymore.
Mhm.
Uh,
So
One
yeah,
thing you said that I thought was interesting was that you didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance when you were in high school. So I don't know how recently they implemented that into school at the beginning of
yeah, I
the
have no
day, but
idea.
that is kind of strange at least that it's not been around for forever.
Yeah, I would have thought that would have been like some old tradition that they upkept, but
I'm guessing it was in the 50s and 60s, and I'm guessing, when I was in high school, it was the tail end of the Vietnam War and the beginning of Watergate, and there was sort of a lot of cynicism around there. I'm just guessing it was
maybe
not something we were doing.
yeah.
So you were in high school during the Vietnam War. Did you experience or like have any part in the protests that like the peace protests of like the summer of '69 and
So I graduated in 76, right? So I started in 72.
Okay.
uh-huh.
I sort of missed that. There were the bombing of Cambodia, so people were upset, but we didn't, but the draft was over,
Hmm.
so people didn't walk out. But there's still some sense of, I mean, it was actually an interesting time where I think there were some students who were really active and some students who really were not.
Hmm.
Interesting.
And I think you can draw sort of parallels with I guess the current Bethlehem student body in that sentiment of some students being active and some not because there is sort of like the overarching ideal of like progressivism like throughout Bethlehem like laced into like certain like groups social groups in particular but then again maybe a less talked about but equally as prominent group that is very much anti-progressive and more critical of the progressive voices in the school. So
Yeah, I've always thought
yeah.
there were like a lot of like progressive minds at the school, but there's never been really any like centralized movements, at least as of recent, I wouldn't say.
Well, when I was growing up, it still is. It was the politics of the town was a very, the city of Albany was a big Democratic machine, and very Democratic, and town of Bethlehem was very Republican.
Really.
I'm
You know,
trying to think.
There's, I mean, there's certain pockets of the town of Bethlehem now that are sort of red leaning, but I would say overwhelmingly, like the Bethlehem, or the Democratic candidate for town supervisor won by like 70% of the votes this past November. He's a
it's
great
changed a
guy.
lot. When I was a kid, Republicans always won.
That's
Really?
interesting.
In fact, what I was telling a friend of mine, we're still friends from high school, and when I was in high school, so it's the election of '72, we were working on the McGovern campaign, and we were like writing letters. You write letters, and the week before McGovern for the election, Newsweek put out an issue about where they thought the election was going to be, and whatever the colors were, it was like a sea of red, except for like one blue state, which was Massachusetts. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how can that be? Like everybody I know is a Democrat, but that was my small circle of friends.
Yeah, it is interesting kind of realizing sometimes that you do kind of live in a bubble, especially in high school, I feel like.
I wonder what demographic shift went onto Bethlehem in between your time in the high school and others that shifted the political environment so massively. That's an interesting topic.
I'm guessing there are a lot of people who are state office workers, right? It was a very, I don't know if that population probably has turned over. So I don't know if more people used to flee the city to live in the suburbs. I don't know if that's still true.
Yeah, I mean, urban sprawl is still a big thing. It's part of the reason why like downtown Albany has nothing to do in the nighttime. But yeah, no, I guess in terms of how that affects suburbia, it's maybe not talked about enough.
My question on the like kind of shift a bit. Would you say that it was more the adults that were red leaning in your time, or would you say like even kids at high school, like people you would talk about like in your grade levels with politics were still more red leaning?
I think there was not a big difference for the most part
That's interesting.
between how parents felt and how their kids felt when I went to high school. I'd say generally, if your parents were kind of Democratic, so were you. If your parents kind of Republican conservative, so were you.
I think that's probably still a trend, but I feel like you maybe
I
more.
think no, I think social media, if anything, has been the biggest determinant in maybe uphealing that trend and making it so that I don't know, girls who have more conservative parents are influenced by their friends and like seeing what they post and what they repost on social media.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I would say again, like social media is one of the biggest changes or changers in demographic uh, sort of analytics that you could point to in high school at this time.
Um,
In terms of outside of high school, though, um, you were the president of NBC News from 2001 to 2005, if I'm not mistaken. And
Hmm.
then in 2007, you became the CEO of WNet.
Yeah.
Um, if we wanted to start chronologically and talk about your time at NBC, um, one thing that we wanted to talk about, not to get too political from the jump, was that obviously with our current administration sort of attacking free speech or targeting media outlets in this current day and age. Um, Donald Trump has called the former company NBC, uh, sorry, let me pull up the quote, the worst and most biased network in history. He's attacked female NBC reporters, calling them terrible and not smart enough. He's repeatedly complained that NBC hasn't repaid him with friendlier coverage due to the fact that he was apparently so friendly to NBC when he was on The Apprentice. So I guess sort of in a general sense, what's your immediate reaction to those quotes from him, and how does it make you feel being that you were part of the news industry for so long?
Well, you know, if you, well, it's true he said all the things about NBC. He's also said horrible things about ABC and horrible things about CBS.
Yeah.
I mean, and PBS, where I work now, and NPR. I mean, he doesn't like what's called the mainstream media at all. And his attention seems to go from one thing to another when he expresses his displeasure. So I think all of those things are, whether no matter who you said them about, are rude, inaccurate, unfair. Um, and I don't think, there are plenty of presidents who don't like the coverage they get. I'm guessing all of them don't like the coverage they get.
Probably to an
Uh,
extent.
I, that maybe it goes for the job, but I think his personal attacks are beyond the pale. And I think in some ways I think they're losing the impact because for the people who don't like the press, they still don't like them. But for anybody who's sort of unsure, the attacks seem so personal that I think they don't really have much. I don't think that they really land. I think they feel what they are, like a person who's doesn't like criticism and then lashes out.
Yeah, they don't seem very like they don't hold much weight really. Um, so especially being at NBC at the time of the Clinton impeachment, did you see any like political pressure then covering that kind of story? And if so, like what kind of differences in the political pressures do you see now?
I mean, I didn't feel political pressure then. I did feel, which everybody does, is when there's a huge contentious issue that people often get polarized by it, and it's very hard for some people, even if you think you're playing it down the middle, which I would argue we always did. Some people don't see it that way, and for some people who were super supporters of President Clinton, who
Mhm.
thought it was outrageous, and these were personal conduct, and it was overshadowed all the good things they're doing from the country, and they thought we went too far and covered it much too much. And for other people who thought like this was a moral crisis at the core of the presidency, they thought we didn't cover it enough.
Hmm.
Always gonna be somebody mad at you in this industry.
Yeah,
And
that's not a bad thing, by the way. News,
Mhm.
if we get it from both sides, maybe we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
You mentioned how you always try to, as you say, play it down the middle almost, give attention and a voice, I guess, to both sides of the issue. That's been a certain trend in perhaps newer media outlets that have taken a lot of pride in being neutral. Would you say that in general, like mainstream media has a responsibility to counter that sort of polarization, or is it more so something that isn't required but more so optional?
It used to be the reason that the press, the mainstream would say they played it down the middle, or
Mhm.
there was an economic reason to do so. There were three broadcast networks. That's all there were. When people watched the evening news, like 95% of the country watched it. So you couldn't afford to play to one small group. Among the many things that changed, you talk about social media, is this splintering of information. So Fox proved you can make a ton of money by aiming to a narrower group and giving them the information that they feel comfortable in hearing. And that's one of the scary things about the world you the guys live in, is you can surround yourself with news that you agree with, and the algorithm supports you. And it gets you more riled up. It shows you things that get you angrier. So I think that's a difference. I would say most journalists I know would say that our job is to try to be as fair as we can, recognizing everybody has personal opinions, but to try to work through those. Um, because it's not our job to change minds. It's our job to make sure you have enough information to make up your own mind. Do you know guys know who Tim Russert is? He used to host Meet the Press years ago. He was a very smart journalist.
What was
And
the name? Tim who?
Tim Russert. Tim
I
Russert. He hosted
not
Meet
sure
the
what
Press maybe 15 years ago now. But he was a former political guy who
Yeah.
got to be host at Meet the Press, and he was incredibly popular. Meet the Press was number one by a lot, a Sunday morning show. And he always said, "Look, my job is when I interview someone is to say, what would the other side say, and in a respectful and smart way to challenge that person. And it's up to that person to make their best arguments. And that's what a democracy is about. And I think that's what journalists should think about. It's not our job to inject our own personal points of view. It's our job to say, here are facts you need to know. Here's another opinion. Um, you should moderate it. You shouldn't say things that are not true. You shouldn't share, you don't want to challenge somebody with facts that are wrong. But at the end of the day, it's not our job to help to make um, politicians look good or to advance their arguments. It's their job.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
our job to be the eyes and ears of the public.
Yeah, some of those like what you said about kind of just surrounding yourself with things you agree with. Like some of the echo chambers you see on social media is crazy. Like, I'd be like scrolling on Twitter sometimes, which should really not do, but you see somebody say this insane thing and you're just like, how on earth could they possibly believe this? And then you realize that like their entire Twitter feed is just people agreeing with them. Yeah.
I mean, more than ever, you guys live in a world where you can just have entirely separate relationships with the world, entirely separate facts, entirely separate
Hmm.
stories. So people who spend their whole time on Fox versus people who spend their whole time on MSNBC are even looking at different things, even different events. I mean, some
Yeah.
things, Fox doesn't even cover some things and covers other things to a crazy degree.
Yeah.
And then,
Go
sorry,
ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
that sort of almost brings up a different discussion in that it's a question as to whether news media companies, whatever you want to call it, should platform these individuals that they can disagree with because
What's the YouTube series called?
Jubilee,
Yeah,
yeah,
Jubilee. There's this YouTube channel called Jubilee, and they'll bring on like
hmm,
one
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 reasonable person and then 20 fascists,
yeah,
right?
it's like versus 20 far right conservatives, and you're like, okay, like of course, apparently, like it's kind of
Yeah.
good to see these people and their views
But
taken down, but like, why are you platforming
is
these
that
people?
something you think about when you conduct interviews with people you strongly disagree with? Are you concerned that if they articulate themselves well, their ideas will gain a certain amount of traction? Or does it come with sort of like a confidence, like, I can make these people look the way I want them to?
No, I think it's the I think you shouldn't be afraid of ideas. And
Hmm.
that's what democracy is about. There's a Jefferson talked about, that putting ideas in the public is like a disinfectant. And what's right, and you can't um, if there are ideas which are dangerous or scary, then I think our job is not. But people are interested in them, then I think our job is to put them in context, right? To make sure you appropriately challenge people. If they're based on lies, then it's your job is to challenge them. But I think it's a scary thing to go. I don't trust the public, so I'm not gonna give these people, airtime. Now, if they're just totally wacko and nobody supports them, that's different,
Hmm.
right? There are people totally, crazy, and if someone believes like God's talking to them through their molars, I don't think they necessarily should be on television. But if somebody has a real following and people are listening to them, right? Then I think the answer is, then I don't think you say, well, we can't put them on top. I don't want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
There's people thought that said, if the press had taken Hitler a lot more seriously in 1933, he wouldn't have been where he was. But instead, he sort of kept growing, growing power. And by then, he was sort of overwhelmed people. Then he started to control the media, so it was too late. But I think it's dangerous to say it's an unpopular opinion, or I don't agree with it, and I'm worried that other people find it persuasive, so I'm not going to put them on television. I mean, here's a good example in the '60s, there were people who were against civil rights, right? And they said horrible things in it, and they had support. But over time, putting people like George Wallace on the air and Lester Maddox, who were real segregationists, was a good thing because the people got to see who they really were. That what they said was based in hate and it was nonsense. And over time, not instantly, but over time, they lost support.
Hmm.
I think I would say one of the reasons why maybe people have become more scared to platform ideas like that is because, like you were saying, there's just so much polarization. You could, state these facts, and then people that might be following those ideas, they like go watch their own news channel, which is saying like the completely opposite thing. It's like even if there are facts, sometimes people just might not believe them.
Yeah, and I think that's true. But I also think if that's true, then those people are already, in some ways, already finding other ways to get their words out. Right? They're
Yeah.
going to talk from the audiences. So to the degree that they can be challenged, and to the degree you can let other people see who they are, I think that's a good thing.
I think well, you mentioned that sort of the discrepancy between putting someone like so crazy that they don't have a following on the rather than or I guess opposed to the idea of putting someone who does have a following whose beliefs may be equally as wild, but the following they've amassed gives them sort of some sort of credibility, at least to be in the news. Does that not come with any concerns about normalizing certain views that, despite may have already undergone some sort of normalization? Do you think that giving them that platform, airing them, even if they do have some sort of following, is problematic in the sense that it, if anything, just gives them credibility to be on the
Yeah,
show?
I think you're right that there's a scale, and it's hard to it may be hard to know someone who's just so totally uh, obscure and when you reach that line. But I would say, look, if you have someone that gets 30% of the vote, or their ideas that reach that kind of level of popularity, I don't think you can avoid it. I mean, yes, you run the risk that 30% could grow to 40%, or 40% could grow to 50%. And argue and if that's the case, and this all assumes, by the way, that their ideas are in fact truly dangerous as opposed to something you just disagree with. I
Hmm.
mean, here's an example: climate change.
Hmm.
So, most of the science would agree that climate change is a thing and it's happening, right? And there are climate deniers, and they're a small number. And occasionally people put them on and they challenge them to say, 99.999% of science disagrees with you.
Hmm.
There does need to be a movement out. Even some scientists go like, we might have exaggerated it. Climate change is a bad thing. But the idea that Earth is not going to be here tomorrow, maybe that's wrong. Like, did the climate thing overplay their hand? I don't know about that, but I know the only way to understand that is to have rigorous debates and not be afraid to say to anybody that you disagree with or agree with, right? That should take more examination, because maybe it's possible that climate change is indeed a real problem, and things are and the climate is going up, but not. If you read some of the early days of climate change, Al Gore's movie, that if we don't do anything, the entire planet will flood. Maybe that's not true.
Hmm.
And maybe those hands, I mean, here's a good example, I think, is this is for the whole country, is COVID. Like, we seem unwilling to talk about it. Both sides do. The right doesn't want to talk about it, right? They want to live in the world that everybody overreacted, and the kind of left doesn't want to talk about it, right? And the answer may be, you know what, there were some good things, like distancing was a good thing, but maybe the mask didn't really work, right? And maybe we did overreact, and maybe kids should have gone back to school earlier than they did. And
Hmm.
we're not even having a good debate about it. We're not even looking at the data because people are afraid to talk about it. Because I think both sides are kind of afraid to be, maybe it's true. Maybe in fact, people on the right it's true. Kids should have gone back to school. The mask didn't make any difference, or it made little difference, except for really critically sick people. Or conversely, maybe all those people said don't do anything. More people died. A million people died. Right? Maybe more or less people would have died. So I think we can't be afraid to have these discussions.
Hmm.
Yeah. Did you have something? Sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned the importance of sort of debate to get to the truth, whatever that truth may be. That's sort of a piece of logic that's been applied to the funding of universities, right? At least in the past year, obviously the current administration has heavily criticized and threatened higher education due to a supposed lack of intellectual diversity. Um, would you say that that logic of the importance of rigorous debate, does that extend to the private sector and colleges needing to maybe, I don't know, employ more conservative professors, or as a private institution, do you think they have the right to ignore that, whether um it benefits them or not?
I think both things can be true. I think they're private institutions, so they'll have to do what they want. And I think everybody, businesses, academia, benefits from more diversity of thought. Um, and that we all benefit from getting different points of view. So to the degree that, and that's, if you look at successful businesses, the ones that do the best are the ones that have a workforce, an executive team that reflects the public that they serve. Um, and no matter what it is, I think if you tend to just get a conservative point of view or just a liberal point of view, I think your education suffers.
But surely the best way to get there isn't through threatening to like pull funding from them.
That's why
What?
I agree. They're
Yeah.
private.
So
I don't think
how do we get to that sort of ideal point of intellectual diversity on campuses without like uh threatening their existence in the first place?
I think you're going to see some of it, or I know this because I went to Tufts and I know there's a institute that's just starting, which is trying to help professors to get different points of view in there. Because part of it is I think even professors are like, wait a minute, I don't want my students don't like this, right? I'm afraid of the pressure I might get from them. So I think there's going to be some movement in academia, like how do we make sure our syllabi are a little more balanced and have different points of view. And I think students and parents are going to start to asking for it. I think you're seeing parents who are helping students make choices, saying like some universities, like I don't like the I don't perceive that this university is going to give my child a balanced point of view, or is not going to make them feel accepted for who they are. And that will be the forces of business. That will be people saying, wait a minute, if I'm losing interest in my school, if applications are dropping, they will address that because that's good business.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of just talking about like completely polar opposite views, and even extending just to like the size of some people's voices, with running companies or being the president of NBC News with such a large scope, how do you kind of make sure that not only are both sides of the spectrum being voiced, but also like, voices that may not have much power? Like how do you make sure they're getting the same kind of coverage as, more mainstream ideas?
I think it's a challenge. I think it's part of what I really like about public media is public media is really about trying to make sure we get all voices, including the, people may not maybe overlooked sometimes by commercial media. Um, but I think, the goal is to try to get all sides of a debate or of an issue. Um, you know, and I think this is once again about in terms of fairness. When you do issues about social policy,
Mhm.
there's some people who feel like, wait a minute, you guys only interview victims. Like you interview all these poor people who are being taken advantage of some drug or some policy. Why don't you interview the people who are good? Why don't you do those stories, right? Why don't you talk about the pressure on a company to achieve to get a return on their investment? So those are different points of view um, that are held by often different. And I think what's a challenge as journalism to try to make sure you can capture all parts of that story. And one thing that's good about the press when there's what's bad about the press is some media is sometimes we glom onto a story when it's a hot story, and that's like the only thing we cover, right? And so I had a friend who's a reporter in Israel, and he said the way that America covers media covers the world, it's like a spotlight in darkness, and it just spins around, and then it lands somewhere,
Yeah.
like it's Iraq or Afghanistan or right or Israel, it just covers it, but it then ignores everything else. Then it goes somewhere else, and it lights up and ignores everything else. But his point was when it really puts a white hot glare on it, it does cover a lot of it. So I think there's some issues when it really does become critical where you do get a lot of different aspects of it. Like, I think like the opioid story probably took for us too long to get there, but once they did, there was an awful lot of coverage,
Yeah.
uh, and it was clear that among the worst victims were people who had the least resources, right? Where they go into towns and like that there would be more opioid prescriptions, three times as many people live in the town.
Hmm.
Right? And those were stories that the press covered really hard, and a lot of people didn't like. So I think there are times that we get it right, not all the time. Part of the question is, once again, having a diverse newsroom and having a lot of different sources to make sure you don't just talk to the people that you see on the subway or go to dinner with, but try to make sure you have a huge, or wide aperture to try to find and get a lot of different points of view.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Would
I
go
want
on.
something quick, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Do you think if uh channels like MSNBC or Fox started to incorporate the other side more, like if you saw NBC start bringing on a lot more like right-wing people, and like broadening that scope more than they already do you think that would raise viewership because people would see it as more objective, or do you think maybe you'd see viewership drop because some of their more like left-leaning people would be like, "Oh, this is ridiculous. I don't want to watch this anymore."
I think we know the answer to this. Actually, I think viewership would drop if you can look. There was a good case study. There was MSNBC, which now is I guess is not MSNBC, it's ONBC or whatever, they rebranded it, whatever, but
Mhm.
it's right. It's that, and they've gone through a couple different things. They tried to have different conservative hosts on, and that did not work.
Yeah.
Um, and Fox would occasionally, put a liberal host on, but they stay pretty carefully to what the views our audience wants to. And CNN was sort of in the middle. It's like we can get all points of view.
Uh-huh.
And CNN's now kind of third. Like Fox is first because they stayed true to the um, right, and MSNBC second, and CNN's third. When I was back at NBC, we did this thing about how long people watched because it wasn't
Mhm.
just the number of people watching; it's how long they watch.
Yeah.
And the average Fox viewer watched like 78% of an hour. And then the average then CNN viewer was like 50%, and MSNBC was like 35% or something like
Mhm.
that. Maybe even higher. So the point is there's a loyal group. It's not more people, just this group that watches so much. And Fox has made a very comfortable sort of living room for people of a conservative point of view. I mean, it looks good, it sounds good, they're smart people, right? But it kind of plays to their point of view. And the degree they're liberals wrong, they always lose. The debates are done, so the host, you pretty much know the way the kind of the answer they're looking for,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? And when MSNBC has tried to go introduce more to get away from get them sort of the progressive point of view, they lose viewers. So I think this is a good example. What's happened is, because there's so much information, you can get the views you want. You can get the view that makes you feel comfortable. And
Yeah.
most people don't like to be challenged, or many people. Many people are like, I want the entertainment of being like, I'm right, those other people are wrong. I want to read well-produced TV that keeps reminding me they're wrong, we're right.
Yeah. So how do you see like I'm sorry, Oliver.
It's okay.
How do you see a future where a channel like CNN or just like a more centrist channel can find their way to that top spot?
But you have to remember, even though the cable, though small, it's still a relatively niche audience.
Mhm.
Uh, there are still, I don't know, 25 million people who watch the three evening newses. There's still a huge audience that watches NPR, that watches PBS.
Mhm.
There's a huge audience that reads, um, depends how you think their coverage is, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, and like view things that have are much less, if at all, have a distinct point of view. So I
Mhm.
think there is an audience out there for it. And I think when people get lost, or there's a big issue, I think that sometimes they go, I want different points of view. I'm confused. And then you don't just always want to hear from somebody to tell you that you're correct.
Mhm.
So I think we're still learning. Your generation will be interesting. You come of age having, less and less experience with quote mainstream media, living through COVID. I'm not sure what the impact of that is about your views about society and
Everything we know.
right. And I think now it'll be interesting to see. Um, and there still is a profitable world of sustainable quote mainstream journalism out there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So on the thought of how mainstream media companies have sort of amassed like a cult following, like you mentioned how Fox News has that reliable base where like I don't know, like their viewers watch like 70% of their specials. What's the ultimate end goal with that? Like, have they reached their end goal? Like, are they comfortable in not expanding past the base that they've built now? But I guess from sort of just like a corporate media perspective, are they actively trying to expand, or is it more so focused on the short term, would you say?
I would say every news organization in these days is looking for more viewers, but there's two things you want to maximize the viewers you have. That's true for everything. It's
Mhm.
true like when the reason Discovery did Shark Week is because sharks did really well, and so the 3 hours because sharks just kept that audience there. So I think it's part of like you want to satisfy the audience you have, and in terms of expanding, it may not be as many getting new viewers or new viewers at different points of view. It's reaching other viewers in different places and platforms. So it's the reason why people are streaming and have websites and have podcasts is to try to make sure you can reach your audience either in different ways in which they want to be entertained or reach out to new audiences. I think every organization is feeling like you need to expand, you need to grow because the audience is on many different platforms, so you have to be there too.
Yeah, you mentioned how sort of the companies are like expanding into like different types of media past just like nightly news, like they have podcasts, TV shows, you name it. Another way that I've seen at least in recent times, companies at least try to make an attempt at sort of expanding their base is employing people to talk on the news who are very much opposed to the sort of ideology that the media company is known for. Like I think it was CNN who hired like Rick Santorum, like the crazy anti-gay
Mm.
marriage like Republican. He ran for president in like 2016, I think. Um, would you say that that's a good way of expanding, or is it more so just frustrating the base that they've already created in that the loyal CNN supporters have to listen to Rick Santorum talk, you know?
I think, for all those TV producers, you try to toe that line about one of the things that makes a good program is some kind of tension.
Uh-huh.
So you want a little bit of like friction or disagreement. Now you want to make sure you win, but that's what you want. So I think everybody tries to go like just having people sit around for an hour and all agree with each other gets a little boring. So having someone who can come on and be a part of the conversation is good. They shouldn't win, but it should be part of the conversation. So I think that's a little bit of what I think that's sort of the Fox game plan. I think it's a little bit of the MSNBC game plan. Um, I think uh, CNN goes out of the way to try to make sure we have some Fox, some Trump representation on the shows because it's boring just everybody sit around and agree with each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I just talking about like the kind of like rivalry or competition between um news companies. It's always been kind of a big thing on breaking stories to be like the first place to cover it. And I've always wondered like how do, especially like running news channels like you do, how do you find the balance between like the speed at which you get a story out and like the due diligence and the proper like fact checking you do before you start
Yeah.
airing something?
So on the one hand, I have to say being first means less and less and less. Um, when I started, it was a big deal. You've got things first. I think part of the world we live in, where there's so much news, and you get it on your phone 2 seconds later,
Mhm.
is it's hard to get a clean like you got some story and nobody else has it. It's hard to get exclusives.
So that's
Um,
become less and less at like the
now,
being
so
first is
so I
more.
think being first, I think there's other things like you want to if you can get an interview.
Mhm.
Nobody else has that. That can mean something. But when I was at NBC, we did a study once, and I really pushed the newsroom to be first. And MSNBC was first like 70% of the time, and it made no difference at all.
Yeah,
Like it's cable news. You can be first by 2 minutes, and somebody else will have it. So I think that's lost some of that. Getting stuff first has lost some of that its luster as a competitive skill.
that's interesting.
I
And
think
I think,
journalists still want to be like, you still want, look, we became journalists because we're curious and we want to find stuff out. And if you can find stuff out and nobody else has it, that's part of the fun of being a journalist.
yeah, that idea of having a piece of information that no one else does, it's sort of almost assumed a new role in the media in these past few years, with the media actively being a part of politics rather than just politics being what the media reports. Like when Pete Hegseth added the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic into some crazy classified group chat. Like as crazy as that is, that obviously benefited sorry, that obviously benefited the Atlantic to a
Yeah,
huge extent, I would imagine.
yeah.
So I think that logic could almost be extended into media's actual participation in politics rather than observation.
I mean, I think part of to me that's also the value kind of like investigative reporting. The idea of you can get a big, you can um, get a big story that nobody else has. So it's not getting it first; it's getting some in depth of what happened, how it happened, the kind of color that makes it interesting, where you can describe the whole thing. I think that stuff will still have value.
Mhm. Yeah, I can after you saying that, I can definitely see how that's become less and less important just because the ubiquity of
Yeah, if
information.
I reported that there was a a train car collision in outside Chicago, and 2 minutes later somebody else did, and 3 minutes later everybody else had it, and then 4 minutes later it's on the wires and or it's on social media.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So does that logic go both ways that if it's unimportant to be quick to a piece of media, is it also how negatively does it affect the company if they just miss like a piece of media that maybe other organizations
You
got
know,
to?
I think there's an understanding like if you occasionally miss some things, you can't miss like big things because you
Mhm.
didn't go. Like
Yeah.
you can't not send people to cover natural disasters. Be like,
Mhm.
you didn't somebody the hurricane. That's a so those are real misses. Those make a difference. But
Mhm.
like who got to the hurricane site first? Not so much. So you have to show up as a journalist. I think that will always be true. And if you don't, I think then I think the audience will punish you. Uh,
Mhm.
and as I said, I think you have to be there. You have to be out in the street, quote on the street, covering things, let people see you. But I don't think you always have to be first.
That idea of like natural disasters, like there's certain stories that are too big to gloss over in any capacity. Um, would you say that there maybe were certain times, like during the tenure at NBC or WNet, where a story was so big that it almost made you think about and sort of step back and maybe even like create some sort of nervous tension as to how you should cover it? Or was it more like strictly business where nerves or any psychological thought that the reporter or journalist or even CEO had uh, came into any real sort of relevance in any capacity?
Well, no, I mean, I was there for 9/11, and
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
huge story. And on the one hand, it was everybody did their job incredibly seriously. It was an incredible time when nobody knew what was happening, and people were watching TV around the clock. And I think we all understood how important what we were doing was make sure we got things right, but also to try to put a human dimension on that story, so people could not just and there was so much tragedy in that story, and heroism, and so going and telling that story over and over again was interesting. Um, it didn't occur to us at the time that the way that we in the beginning a couple of days we kept running the video of the plane hitting the building, and then like some psychiatrist said, you have to stop doing this. It's going to be because we're going to have nightmares. You have to stop. So
Gotta stop.
Do you like do you take
all types of
some sorry do you like take some sort of like pride in being like really like the messengers of like the most major story that's happening in the world right now? Is that sort of like an appeal, like the ethos of being able to say that like you are the reason everyone knows about this?
I mean, the reason everybody knows about it because it was the incredibly brutal attack on America, right?
Mhm.
And the mere fact that I think if a couple people caught it in cell phones, it would be viral. It was
Yeah.
such a big thing. I think what TV did and what media can do a lot of times is add depth and context and understanding. Big things happen. People are like, what is this about? How did it happen? What does it mean? What do we do? Those take time to get really, and whether there's written reporters or interviews, getting experts to help you think about it and understand it. Um, Especially for big stories. All big stories are generally about eventually not just about what happened in that day, but about much larger things. What caused it to happen, how the people were victimized, how the world sees it. And that's everything from like 9/11, which is obvious, but even like Diana. So,
Mhm.
straight from in a car crash. And I mean, we covered that for like maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. I mean, it's a dateline though. I think we did like 14 stories in a row on it. And every time I'd be thinking, oh, this is enough. People wanted more because it wasn't just about this. It was about the press. It was about feminism. It was about, women who potentially taken advantage of. It was about the royal family. It was about money. It was about fame. It was about all these other things. And then people are like, I need to keep understanding this. I'm trying to grapple with it. And that's, I think, the advantage of what what good media can help you do is try to help you process it, try to figure out what does it mean to me? Why am I obsessed by it?
Mhm.
Why is other people obsessed by it, right? How should I think about it? What are different ways to think about it? Um, and that's, I think, what you often don't get on, you know, Snapchat and
Yeah.
Facebook. I think it takes a little bit more.
Yeah. You mentioned Dateline. If I'm not mistaken, you were kind of one of the big reasons that Dateline expanded into the five shows a night or 5 shows a week format. Was there? I was always wondering, was there any time you almost felt like you were struggling to come up with an episode or a story for that, or did you just kind of find that there was always something to talk about that people wanted to
You know,
watch?
the news is a big is a news is a big friend. There's always stuff happening. I mean, I
Yeah.
think in part we were like first we said we're going to put news back in news magazines. When there were big news stories, we would jump on them.
Uh-huh.
Also, when I did, they went had a whole range of things. We would do hours, we did investigations, we did criminal cases. So I always thought like Dateline was this variety show. It could be everything from like stuff that happened that day to looks back to history. As long as they were compelling stories, as long as you told stories well, people would watch them.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I couldn't. We went from like one night to 2 nights to 3 nights to 4 nights to 5 nights, and it was exhausting doing five
Yeah,
nights a
I
week.
bet. Yeah.
But it was not. I never sort of ran out of content.
That's interesting. Yeah, you guys, also, if I'm not mistaken, NBC was kind of the first place that expanded the news magazine genre into such a wide-ranging thing, like 5 shows a week. Like, were you just confident in the content that you guys could make this work? Like, did you know like this is kind of what the people wanted?
If they had said to me, now you're doing one show, would you like to do five? I'd be like, are you out of your mind? But because it was like one, and then like I think something happened, another show was not ready, so we started doing two shows. Like,
Kind
well,
of
we
lived up to it.
and it was like Tuesdays and Thursdays, and like, couldn't you do one more show? Like, all right, we can do Tuesdays and Thursdays and like Monday.
That's
And then, well, then once you're doing it, you get like, of course we can keep doing it. I just sort of never wanted to say no. I just want to be like,
yeah,
wherever you need us, we're going to be there.
that's fun.
'Cause I thought it was good for the show, good for the news division, to always to be there, to say, no matter what, we'll step in.
Yeah. Thinking back to those days at Dateline NBC, was there like a particular story you could point to that you just think like, man, I really enjoyed like covering this, you know?
There's so many, man. I really loved I loved it. I had a great team, great reporters, great writers. Um, I do remember, I don't know what the story was now, but there was one time when there was a whole Friday night from 9 to 11. And they said, could you do two datelines? And I said, I wonder if I could do one story over for 2 hours. And we're like, well, yeah, why not? Go, whatever. Right? I had a lot of freedom.
Uh-huh.
So,
Gotta figure it
anyway,
out, yeah.
so the hard part doing it about telling stories in a commercial television, you sort of need a twist at every commercial break so you don't go away. So if you ever watch shows like Dateline, it's always like, you know, they would not know what the doctor would say next. Something that would make you stay over the break.
Yeah.
So you need like six of those, but for a 2 hour, you need like 12 of them. You need 12 ways to kind of point the audience one way, then the other, and have them keep coming back. Um, but now they do it all the time. I mean, it's once you kind of figure it out. So that was kind of, I like the fun of it, the intellectual challenge of it.
Yeah. I was wondering, going from NBC, which is such a large corporation, to WNet, which is a bit smaller. Do you find yourself um, do you find yourself missing covering like the huge national stories, or do you kind of like focusing in on some of the more local things that you get to cover at WNet?
I mean, we're still we're the biggest PBS station in the country.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to like sound
No,
like.
but it's local, but it's not like we're in, we're I mean, we're still a pretty big city. We cover a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Um, in this job, what I like more is at NBC News, I covered news. Here, I do a lot. We do a lot of things about arts and culture, and that's what PBS is good at.
Hmm.
So I've kind of broadened the things that I'm in charge of and I'm interested in. So I like that. Um, every job I've had, I've been incredibly lucky in my career, like unbelievably lucky. And I was at ABC News before NBC, and I worked for 13 years there, and I worked for some of the greatest anchors and reporters, and I got to travel the world. Um, I was in Berlin the night the Berlin Wall fell. I mean, I was incredibly lucky to do all these
Oh,
great things.
wild.
And every one of those jobs had things I didn't like and things that I did because that's why it's called work. And I savored every one of them. And when I was just me being out there producing, I loved doing that. When I got to be supervising other people, I liked doing that. When I was running a show, I liked doing that. When I ran a news division, I liked doing that. Running sort of a whole station now. And there are different parts of those jobs. None of them are perfect. I always tell people, like, if you're lucky enough, like me, you'll do something you love, but you won't love every day, and you won't love 100% of every job because there's no job like that, right? I'm guessing, even Aaron Boone has some days he goes like, I don't like this job, right? I'm
You can tell
guessing,
Aaron Boone has some days he doesn't like that job.
I'm sure there's whoever it is. When I was a kid growing up, I thought Johnny Carson, who hosted the Tonight Show, then was like he must be the happiest guy in the world. He was like he was the king of late night. He made $1 gazillion. He hung out all the right. And then I read biographies of him, and he said he had issues. He was an unhappy guy. He had a lot of issues in his life he was coping with. So there is no job that which will always be great. But if you're smart, you'll find the greatness in those jobs and the fun in them. And I always did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you've been in a number of different positions in the media since the beginning of your career, but I guess sort of looking at news in a general sense, how would you say like the responsibilities and like the roles that major news outlets play have evolved since the beginning of your career?
I think on the one hand, single broadcast had bigger influence at the time, like when there were just three evening newses. There's a thing when Walter Cronkite was the big anchor of CBS, went to Vietnam and he came back and he said, in this reporter's opinion, we will never win this war. And President Johnson said, if I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost the country, like one person. And he
Wow.
was called the most trusted man in America. I don't think we're going to see those days again. There's just too many voices out there.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know that's a bad thing either. I mean, there's a lot. It's good to have a lot of voices out there.
Yeah, for sure. Um, let's see. Just thinking back to I guess sort of an ultra specific, not ultra specific, a specific instance that you can point to that I'd imagine that you played a big part in during your time from in the early 2000s at CBS, not CBS, excuse me, NBC, was the media coverage of the Iraq War, right? It's common for mainstream media to sort of look back at that time and criticize, sorry, and criticize the manner in which companies like ABC, NBC, you name it, the way that they cover the Iraq War. It's often that you see people say that media gave too much of a voice to the Pentagon and the Bush administration. Um, I guess one of my question is like, what lessons can we take looking back on that time? Like, how do we learn from that sort of, I don't want to say imbalance, but the sort of weighing of voices that was common during that event?
I think the lesson for us always in any point of history is to be ask questions and be critical of everybody, no matter what they say, and
Mhm.
ask tough questions. The thing that makes it harder sometimes is to say the press, you know, in a world where the Pentagon can often control all the information, it's hard to kind of break through because they have this monopoly on what you get to see and where you get to go. Um, so I think in general, the press has to continue to be innovative and try to find out other ways, other avenues to try to get things. Government is never going to wants to tell you bad news, Republicans or Democrats. That's not what they're there for. Right? They're likely to do good work and to get reelected so they can do more good work. It's not in their interest to share things that aren't going well. So it's reporters' job to try to find those things out. And in a world where people are scared for their jobs and afraid to talk, it's going to be hard. Maybe the difference is now more than ever, there's satellites, there's drones, or things we can see, so that it's harder for them to do that. I think there's more reporting you can use doing social media to try to get other people to come forward and tell you things. So I think there's a little bit more of that. Um, but it's not for people feel like the press let them down in Iraq or Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam's a great example that there's something called the Pentagon Papers, written years and years after the war, right? That shows that essentially the Pentagon was lying to people. And it was written so far after the war, and it was only because a guy, Anos, was secretly Xeroxing things and smuggling them out to reporters who could write about it. But
Mhm.
otherwise, like, how would you get it? There was like, a small group that wrote it. They kept it locked up as a secret source. So it's not like when the press missed things, it's not like, not all the time. It's not like, hey, if you just looked right there, it was. You could have seen there were no dangerous weapons. That was a hard thing to see, right? You couldn't scan the entire country. We didn't have that capability. So when the Pentagon says they've seen it, and other countries vouch for it, it's hard to know that's not turned. In the end of the day, that turns out not to be true.
Yeah.
I guess the way in which media companies actually get information in the first place, um, we don't have to limit ourselves just to the context of the Iraq War. But if there's something that's huge that happens in Washington, let's say, and the media companies are the first to cover it, obviously, how do they what's the most common way that they can actually get that information and give it to the public as quick as possible, before not before other media companies do the same, but just like how do they get that information in the first place, you know?
Well, it depends what it is. I mean, for the most part, especially around the military, it is what they choose to tell you. I mean, they control access to battlefields. They control all this. I mean, here's a good example. The story you're hearing right now about Defense Secretary Hegseth and what happened in the open water.
Hmm.
Are they kill? Are they killing defensive civilians, or is there another story? So those are video controlled by the military, right? It's not like where do we get it from? Now the difference is in this case, some people have seen it and they're outraged by it and they're talking about it. We still haven't seen it. Um, but those critics are certainly getting enough attention, and we pepper the defense secretary and the president of the United States about it all the time, about what's happening, when you're going to release it. Um, so I think it's not as if the press doesn't. I mean, I used to tell people, like, most reporters that I know who cover government, they could care less who's in power. They want a good story. And
Hmm.
a good story is controversy and somebody making a mistake. And it doesn't make a difference. And that's why, when the Clinton administration was in power, they thought, like, God, all this stuff about Whitewater is so pointless. Real estate deals in Arkansas, like, does this really deserve attention? And a lot of critics were saying, like, why is the media giving this so much attention? It means nothing. Um, and part of the reason why is reporters are like, no, no, this is a good story. It's right. There's somebody's in trouble here. Somebody maybe broke the law. It's a good story. Um, and whether that's over the line or not, I think for the most part, the press is looking for that. That's why presidents don't like the press. It's why over time, none of them like it. There's not a single president who's come out here going, like, I thought my coverage was pretty fair. I think they did. None of them feel that way.
Funny. Um, I wanted to ask you about AI. And even before you get into like the ethics and possible threats of it, recently I've been, looking at kind of the business side of the AI industry and how much money we're pouring into it. Do you see any media companies covering the possible like bubble that might be forming in
Oh
in the
yeah,
AI industry?
I think it's a lot. I think a lot of the financial reporters are saying, like, are we in for another crash, like the .com crash?
Yeah, I mean,
So I think people are talking about that. I think people are talking about a lot of people covered environmental beats talking about the incredible energy demands it's going to have and
yeah,
what it could mean. There's other reports who've done stories about when they're building these big AI factories, and did the town sell out to get it? And do people really understand what the environmental risks could
yeah,
be? And then I think there's a lot of good coverage about the ethics of AI, and should there be limits on it, and how should people use it, especially students, but not just students. Um, so
yeah.
I think there's a lot of attention paid to it.
So, yeah, moving to the ethics a little bit, like especially in a industry like news where, truth is the currency. Like, do you see AI posing a huge threat, like with things like deep fakes to that? And if, have you seen it implemented at all in your
What,
work?
what I've seen at my company and most companies is in the journal side. is that we should use AI to do routine tasks that other people don't have
Easy.
to do, to do them faster.
Yeah, yeah.
But nothing should get published or aired without a human eyes or maybe hands touching whatever it is, right? So there's a ton of things which we now still do, but I think are going to be done faster by AI,
Hmm.
right? So I mean, it used to be like when you do this interview, you spend a whole time just literally transcribing the interview and then looking for, right, and then, so if AI can listen to it like that and give you a summary of it and say, here are the nine, let's say we're doing an interview, right? And you decide you're interested in AI,
Uh-huh.
this interview. And they said, all right, tell me all the times you talked about AI, right? And he pulled it out mostly to the interview. Here's what he said. Great. That means you don't have to listen to the whole, if that's what you care about, you don't have to listen to the whole interview. You don't
Yeah.
have to, right? So I think there's a bunch of things where AI can be helpful. Um, I think you have to be careful that we can't live in a world where AI people are making huge editorial judgments. I think that's what you need. But I think they can help people make better. I mean, here's an example where we talked about where I think AI is going to help, and it's already helped. Data reporting is changing the world of journalism in a
Hmm.
good way. So stories about gas leaks or environmental things, right? Um, which used to be just covered on a moment on a small basis just by if something happened in one town or another. AI, you can say scan and look for examples of like gas lines exploding, and it can say like across the country, here's where it happened, here's the things that have in common, and you may somehow be able to put the thing together that connecting the dots may not be something you even saw, but AI can say, now it could be wrong, it can hallucinate, right? But when it's right, it could be a huge time savings.
Yeah.
Is there any like element of fear you would say in the idea that AI obviously wouldn't replace, I would think at least in the short term, it wouldn't replace human reporters, it wouldn't replace necessarily journalists who are writing stories so quickly after they happen. Um, I guess is there any place in the larger news industry that you see AI could actually um replace like human employees?
I think it'll make people more productive. I think it may take out some of the routine things that don't really take a lot of that are done routinely that don't require a lot of human intelligence. They like so even now, like there's some people like sizing interviews, right? Like I have to take it, I have to move, I have to do this. Yeah, I can do that.
Mhm.
Right. I think there's a bunch of graphic things sometimes that AI could do. Right? Adjust the color. AI could do that. But I think, I don't, I think like AI is never going to edit a great movie or
Hmm.
probably write one, right? But AI could help you make a great movie.
Yeah.
I mean, but here's a good example. If you said, look, I need, I want to end this story or this movie with a great sunset. Show me great sunsets.
Uh-huh.
Now, human could spend days looking for like 94,000 sunsets, or AI could spend in a split second and show you 94,000. You may know how you want to, what you're looking for. You may know how you want to build the frame. You may know what the color balance is looking for. You may know the shot that precedes it or the feeling you want, right? Only you know that. But you or someone else doesn't have to spend weeks looking through a bunch of sunsets when AI can do it. I think like that's not a loss. That's okay.
Yeah. I'd agree on that sense.
So would you say that in the news industry before AI took any form of prominence, there were people whose jobs were, I don't want to say mindless, but like there were people who you employed to do not necessarily jobs that would affect the final product, but only just sort of give options to the journalists or
I'm not sure that every job, I think a lot of jobs had elements of it that were clerical,
yeah.
right? I mean, when I was a lad and we were starting, you do an interview, and then we would get there and we'd sit around at the typewriter, there are no computers, and we would play back on our tape recorder the things the guy said, and we would type them up and say, okay, what did he say? I got it. How long was it? What's the time code? It took a couple hours just to do that, to pull the sound bites, right? Before we could write or do anything, we had to do that. Now, AI can do that in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Didn't that just saved us a bunch of time?
Yeah.
Right?
So it,
So I think there's more of that
yeah.
about jobs themselves will become distilled to adding real the part that adds value, and will take away the stuff that doesn't.
So in that sense, it's not necessarily taking away employment, it's just taking away sort of the drudgery of doing
Menial
work.
tasks.
Yeah, exactly. So
You know,
I think
yeah. It'll
that's
take away some because I think when you do the math, right, all those drudgeries probably add up to some jobs you don't need.
yeah, I
But
would
you,
imagine, but
but I don't think I think for a lot of AI, what AI would do will be make people more productive and
mhm.
have them add value to what they do.
Yeah, and you definitely have a more optimistic view of AI in the media than other people we've talked to, which is something I appreciate. You know, that idea of intellectual diversity. That's
Yeah.
a good thought. Um, you mentioned briefly how AI has affected schools. Obviously, school and college being something that takes up quite a bit of our time now. Uh, I saw that you went to Tufts. That was one of my among my top choices for colleges that I was thinking about. I guess just sort of in a general sense, how would you say that your experience as a student at Tufts led to you being the guy you are today
Huge.
as
Huge. I mean, and
yeah
just as my time at BCHS did as well.
yeah
Uh, so I went to college and I ran the newspaper in college, right? And that was, I learned what multitasking was before I think the word was invented. But I was a full-time editor and a full-time student, and I had good grades, and I also worked my ass off. I had to learn how to motivate a staff, and they weren't paid, so I had to learn, how what I thought, and I had to learn how to teach people in a way which I thought was inspiring and not condescending, because there's this beautiful pattern about college, like you pass on what you knew, and at 4 years the whole staff turns over. It's like people taught me, and then I jobs to teach other people. We had a big reunion of former editors of my paper at Tufts recently. You know, 60 years of people. And all had sort of common stories, and all did wildly different things. Some went to law school, some were writers, some stayed journalists, but all of them talked about what a great feeling it was to. There's a sense of mission. I think journalists still feel that, that it's if you want to be a journalist, it's a calling, and it means you're going to make some sacrifices. You have a life that's less predictable. You, um, but what it means is you feel like you're doing something important. You're telling people things they don't know. You're helping them make sense of the world. You know, you're helping one of the important key elements to a functioning democracy is an informed populace, and you're telling them things they need to know or to make smart decisions. So there's a great feeling of merit in jobs like that. And I think, Tufts, the only thing also I learned at Tufts and learned in high school too is that um, part of being a good journalist, but maybe being good at anything, is having a wide range of interests and trying to pull those things together. Because if you get tunnel vision on just any one thing, you'll miss things, right? So, I mean, whatever it is, it's good to think about whatever you're doing, like what I call the voice of the consumer. Like I'm writing this, but who's going to read it? I'm designing, who's going to watch it? I'm building a car, who's going to drive it? Whatever it is you're doing, thinking about what their life might be like, which is not just your life. You want to design things just for you. You want to do things for other people. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of also, college maybe. Like I took a bunch of classes in movies and I just realized how much I love movies. And I still do. And it sort of helped me do my job a little bit, but also just gave me a new passion in life. So
Yeah.
I'm a big thing like that's what college can do for you.
But then again, there is the thought that there is a lot of value in being able to specialize in one specific area, whether that be sort of in a job related like career sense or just like a hobby, like passionate sense. Would you say that the mindset you had of casting a wide range of interests, would you say that in any capacity that makes it harder to focus in and zero in on something that really interests you?
No, I think for me it was I was incredibly focused on what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to be a journalist at a really young age, and I did it, and I um, So I was very focused about that. And I recognized things I wasn't going to do because I was focused on this. But what they say about journalists, but I think it's true for people, a lot of successful people. You have to have, in addition to the thing you're passionate about, right, your career, whatever it is, you should want to have a general knowledge, even if it's like miles wide and an inch deep. You need to have just some general sense of a lot of different things. And if
Mhm.
you push me, I don't know, I know a little bit about a lot of things, enough that I can start a conversation and ask questions, right? I know very little about in depth about a lot, but I have that, and that's been helped not just being a journalist, just being a guy, just talking to people, just looking at life, right? Talking to people about what do you want to do. So you're not just so incredibly tunnel focused on like being a computer designer or a stock trader or whatever you are, because all those people, when I was at NBC, it was owned by GE, and Jack Welch was a very famous CEO of GE, and he told this story about he went to tour the refrigerator plant where they were designing a new refrigerator,
Mhm.
and they showed him like the way you open the refrigerator was that you pulled like the handle was up here and it pulled down like this.
Okay.
And the guy said, "Why'd you do that?" He goes, "Well, I thought it was better. Ergonomically, it's a better thing to do." And he goes, "Nobody wants a refrigerator like that. Nobody wants to reach up here and have the door like open and like it's a crazy thing to do." He goes, "Yeah, but it's statistically it's better." He goes, "So what? Right? That's not the point. The point is you have to think about not just what you're doing, how else will experience it. Nobody's going to want to do this, even if it's arguably a little bit better, right? So like if you're trading stocks, great. You should think about you'll probably be a better stock trader if you think what's happening in the country and how people are spending their money and so forth. If you want to be a biomedical researcher, you'll be better off if you also think about how do people consume medicine. I think it's making sure that I think successful people all do have a sense of tunnel vision. You have to be focused on what you want to do, work hard at it, learn as much as you can about it, maybe make sacrifices because of it. That's all true. But if that's all you are, that's you're just totally fucked up and you don't ever look to your left and your right, you'll both not be as good and I think you'll be unhappy.
Yeah. Geez, I could probably have hours of questions about what it was like having Jack Welch as the owner of NBC while you were there, but I know we have to let you go soon. I think a last thing we'd like to ask you is, do you have anything you would like to say to, high school age students like us at BCHS, if you could kind of give us your 2 cents quickly?
Sure. I mean, uh, I remember when I gave the graduation speech at when I at
Really?
BC. Yeah. And I remember saying, I remember I got a big laugh because it was the bicentennial and I was crazy about the bicentennial. And I said, I think I should say something about the bicentennial, and I just did. Got it. Um, but I remember saying, like, on the one hand, um, uh, I wish that the whole high school experience was a little bit better. Like that's, especially like life is like high school. That high school is hard, and I think
Mhm.
there's not enough appreciation about why it's difficult. It's difficult because everybody's maturing and you're sort of growing into who you are, but you're not done, and that's awkward. I think I wish all of them, both, I wish I and all my fellow students um, had a little more compassion and a little more curiosity about getting along with each other. I think it was high school. I think it was then very cliquey and probably still is. And people still sort of hang out with their friends. Um, and it's too bad there aren't other ways to broaden that because when you go back to your high school reunions, as I have, you realize these people I thought were really different were not that much different. I just didn't
Mhm.
right. We didn't find time to interact. Um, and I think people are so anxious about trying to find who they are that they take some things way too seriously. And I guess I would say to high school students, it all works out. There are painful moments of high school, as I recall. There's a lot of pressure. There was all kinds of pressure about socially and grades and things like that. And I think you should take your life seriously. So I don't think it's a time not to do that. But I think it's also better like don't put so much pressure on yourself, right? Everybody will get through high school. You'll find something to do. You'll look back over that time, and hopefully you'll be able to look back and cherish the friends you have, and cherish those moments that were really special. Because high school is that too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
100%.
thank you so much for your time. We hope you had as much fun as we did.
My pleasure.
Yeah, that was great.
Great
Yes.
talking to you. Go Eagles.
Oh yeah,
Go Eagles.
100%. Thank you so much.
Yeah, have a lovely rest of your evening.
All right. Take care, guys. Nice
Have a
talking
good
to you.
one.
Have a
See
good
ya.
one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wait till it records, yeah.
Uh-huh. Oh, wait, do we stop? Oh, okay. Here it goes.
All right, wait.
Stop recording. Do we need to end the meeting before?
No.